My name is Laura Bennett, and this is how my life was turned upside down. It all started on a rainy Friday afternoon in the small town of Ashford. The streets glistened with water as the gray clouds seemed to reflect my mood. I had always believed in the power of second chances, but little did I know my ex-husband, Ethan, was about to shatter my faith in my future. Ethan and I met in college, our love story the kind that seemed destined to last forever. He was charming, ambitious, and we shared a dream of building a life together. I was a rising architect, freshly awarded a prestigious contract that would change everything. He was a financial consultant, or so I thought. As time passed, the cracks began to show. Late nights spent working, mysterious business ventures, and a growing distance between us. Eventually, I discovered the truth. Ethan wasn't investing our money wisely. He was gambling it all away, hoping for a big win that never came. He drained our savings, racked up debt, and when I found out, it was too late. Despite the betrayal, I tried to hold on to what remained. We tried to rebuild, but the damage was already done. And when Ethan filed for divorce, it was the final blow. He had left me with nothing but the weight of his mistakes. Or so he thought. What he didn't know was that I wasn't the same woman I had been when I first met him. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't broken. I had plans, strategies, and the will to take back what was rightfully mine. As I watched him walk away with his life intact, I knew one thing. He had underestimated me. And when the time came, I would take everything he had left. Here, Laura Bennett takes center stage, setting up her emotional journey and foreshadowing the revenge that will unfold. Lara had always believed that love and trust were the cornerstones of her relationships, especially with Ethan. Theirs had been a whirlwind romance, filled with late-night talks about dreams and ambitions. As a young architect just starting her career, she had been driven and determined to make a mark in the world. Ethan, with his polished suits and confident demeanor, had seemed the perfect partner, supportive and promising a future together. They were a team, always finishing each other's sentences, always working toward the same goals. When they bought their first house, Lara felt like she had everything she ever wanted. He was supposed to be her partner for life, someone she could rely on. But beyond Ethan, there was Olivia, her best friend since childhood. Olivia had been there through thick and thin, from late-night study sessions in college to countless heartbreaks and successes. Olivia had seen the cracks in Ethan long before Lara did, though she never said anything directly. Instead, she simply offered subtle warnings, little hints when Ethan seemed to disappear for hours or when his behavior started changing. But Lara trusted him, and though Olivia's words stuck with her, she couldn't bring herself to doubt the man she loved. There was also her brother, James. A lawyer in the city, James was her rock in times of crisis. He never judged Lara when she vented about Ethan's late nights or erratic behavior. In fact, he always told her that she deserved better, but Lara refused to listen, still holding on to the belief that things could be fixed. The family dinners, the shared holidays, everything felt like a dream until Ethan's betrayal shattered that reality. The betrayal, however, wasn't just about money. It was about the lies, the broken trust, and the realization that Ethan had never truly valued her. As much as Ethan had taken from her financially, it was the emotional toll that had left Lara feeling empty. Ethan had manipulated her, leaving her to clean up the mess while he had a free pass to move on with his life. The moment Lara confronted him, his indifference was like a slap to her face. There was no apology, no remorse, only a cold sense of entitlement. Through it all, Olivia had stood by her, comforting her when the pain was fresh, reminding Lara of her worth. Olivia had been the one to help Lara see the truth, not just about Ethan's financial deceit, but about herself, her strength, her resilience. Despite her hurt, Lara knew that if there was one person who truly understood her, it was Olivia. She had always been the one to push Lara forward, to challenge her to be better. But even Olivia couldn't have predicted the depths of Lara's transformation. In this moment, as the pieces of Lara's life began to fall apart, she realized something crucial. The people who truly mattered were the ones who stayed, who supported her, no matter the circumstances. And it was for them, and herself, that she would fight. Lara stood in the middle of the living room, holding a letter that she had found hidden in one of Ethan's jacket pockets. The letter wasn't addressed to her, nor was it written by him. Instead, it was a bank statement from a secret account under Ethan's name. Her heart sank as she read the figures on the page. Large transfers of money, funds she had never known existed. The more she read, the more the weight of her betrayal grew. Ethan had siphoned off money from their joint account, all the while pretending everything was fine. He had been living a lie, one that she had foolishly ignored. The sinking feeling in her stomach was soon replaced by an all-consuming rage as the pieces of their life together began to crumble. Ethan had spent the last year telling her that they were investing in their future, that the financial strain was temporary. He promised that their sacrifices were for the bigger picture, for the home, for their future children. And yet, in secret, he'd been making lavish purchases, draining their savings, and setting up accounts without her knowledge. Every bit of money he had taken felt like a betrayal of everything she had given him: her love, her trust, and her future. When she confronted him, standing there with the damning evidence in her hand, his response was chilling. He didn't even flinch. "I was going to tell you," Ethan said, his tone dismissive. "But you're always so busy with your work. You never even notice." His words stung like daggers. She had been consumed by her career, yes. But it was because of him, because he had promised to support her dreams. She had believed in him. But now, standing there in the dim light of their shared living room, she felt as if she were seeing him for the first time. He wasn't the man she had married. He was someone else entirely selfish, manipulative, and utterly indifferent to the hurt he had caused. Lara's voice trembled as she spoke, her heart shattering with each word. "You've lied to me, Ethan. You've lied to my face for months. I trusted you." She shook her head, the realization sinking in deeper. The love she had felt for him now seemed like an illusion, a facade he had carefully constructed to deceive her into complacency. And with that, the walls that she had built around herself began to crack. But it wasn't just the financial betrayal that stung the most. It was the fact that Ethan had been so cruelly indifferent to her feelings. There was no apology, no remorse in his eyes, only an air of entitlement. He had taken from her, and in the process, had taken her trust, her hope, and a piece of her soul. The man she had given everything to had proven to be nothing more than a stranger who had used her for his own gain. As she stood there, the weight of the truth settling in, Lara knew that nothing would ever be the same. Her entire world had been built on lies. The love she had for him, the dreams they shared, had all been nothing but a hollow shell. Lara sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on her chest like an anchor. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with the scent of lies and deceit. Ethan had walked out hours ago, leaving her alone to stew in the wreckage of their life together. Her mind raced, replaying the moment of confrontation over and over, as if trying to make sense of the madness. Every word he had said, every excuse he had offered, seemed hollow now. She had believed him, trusted him. He had been her rock, her partner, the one person she thought would never hurt her. Yet here she was, broken, alone, drowning in the realization that everything she had built with him had been a lie. Her anger surged, hot and consuming. It felt like a wildfire that couldn't be contained, spreading through her veins and clouding her thoughts. How dare he betray her like this? How dare he take what was rightfully hers, knowing how hard she had worked to build their life together? She had sacrificed so much for their future, her time, her energy, her career, and yet he had treated her like a fool. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, tears of betrayal, of heartbreak. How could she have been so blind? As the hours passed, Lara's emotions shifted from raw anger to deep confusion. The hurt was still there, but it was tangled with a sense of disbelief. She couldn't fathom how she had missed the signs. How had she not seen the cracks in their relationship? She had trusted Ethan with everything, her heart, her dreams, her future, and he had thrown it all away for his own selfish desires. The betrayal stung in ways she couldn't explain, cutting deeper than anything she had ever experienced. But it wasn't just the financial theft that hurt. It was the emotional manipulation, the way he had used her for his own gain without a second thought. She felt isolated, trapped in her own mind, surrounded by memories of their once happy life together. Her friends had reached out, but she couldn't bring herself to talk to anyone. They would never understand the complexity of what she was going through. They hadn't seen the love she had given him, the years they had spent building a life. They wouldn't know how deep this betrayal cut. She felt as though she were drowning, suffocating in the weight of her own feelings. Days passed, but the anger lingered, simmering beneath the surface. Lara tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every email, every meeting, felt like a reminder of the life she had lost. The thought of forgiving Ethan seemed impossible. How could she ever forgive someone who had stolen from her, who had lied and manipulated her for so long? The idea of letting him back into her life, of trusting him again, was unthinkable. He didn't deserve her forgiveness, not after everything he had done. And yet, despite the rage and hurt, a small part of Lara still questioned whether revenge was the answer. What would it feel like to take back control, to make him feel the way she did? The thought of seeing him suffer, of watching him lose everything the way she had, gave her a strange sense of satisfaction. The idea of watching him squirm, of making him feel the same powerlessness she had felt, began to consume her thoughts. One evening, as Lara sat in a quiet cafe, nursing a cup of tea, her best friend Emma joined her. Emma could sense the darkness clouding Lara's mind, the way she was wrestling with herself. "Lara, I know you're angry," Emma said softly, taking her hand. "But revenge won't fix this. It won't give you the peace you're looking for. You deserve so much more than that. You deserve to move on, to find someone who values you for who you are, not for what you can give them." Lara didn't respond at first. Emma's words stung, but they were also a lifeline. The anger she had been holding onto began to feel like a burden she no longer wanted to carry. Could Emma be right? Was revenge really the answer, or was it just a way to keep herself chained to the past? For the first time since the betrayal, Lara allowed herself to consider a different path. One where she could heal, rebuild, and reclaim her future without Ethan's shadow looming over her. The decision wasn't easy, but as Lara left the cafe that evening, she knew that it was time to let go of the anger, to stop seeking retribution. The road ahead would be long, and there would be moments when the temptation to get even would rise again. But she was determined to break free. She would rebuild her life, piece by piece, and find the strength to move forward. The revenge she had so desperately craved would remain a distant memory, a lesson learned the hard way. Lara sat at her desk, staring blankly at the spreadsheet in front of her. The numbers blurred, but her mind was racing, plotting out every detail of the plan she had been crafting for the past few days. No longer the emotionally wrecked woman who had cried herself to sleep for nights on end, she had become someone else. Someone colder, sharper, and more determined. She wasn't just going to let Ethan's betrayal slide. No, she would make him pay. Every moment he had taken from her, every ounce of trust he had shattered, she would make sure he felt the weight of it all. The first step was the hardest, taking back what was hers. Lara had always been careful with her finances, managing the accounts, investments, and properties. Ethan had manipulated his way into controlling their joint assets, siphoning off money for his own benefit. But now, with everything crumbling around her, Lara had access to the accounts again. She didn't just want the money back. She wanted to show him that she could strip him of his power. Slowly, she began to redirect funds, moving them into a safe account, making sure every penny that had been stolen would return to its rightful place. It was more than just financial. It was a statement. She would take away his luxury, his comfort, and force him to face the consequences of his actions. But that was just the beginning. Ethan had been using his connections in the business world to further his agenda, his betrayal extending into professional realms she had once trusted. Lara knew she couldn't simply erase his financial footprint. She had to sabotage his reputation, make sure that every lie he had told her, every betrayal he had committed, was laid bare for the world to see. She'd start with his business associates, the ones who had enabled his deceit, and work her way through every door he had closed to her. She would leak information, just enough to rattle his carefully constructed persona, making him question every relationship he had cultivated in his climb to the top. However, Lara wasn't fooling herself. She knew there were risks. Ethan wasn't an idiot. He would fight back, and he would stop at nothing to preserve the life he had built with her money. But she had done her homework. She had people watching, people who owed her favors, who had their own reasons for wanting to see Ethan's empire crumble. She spent her days in shadow, tracking his every move, recording conversations, and analyzing his behavior. He had weaknesses, ones she would exploit. She'd infiltrate his inner circle, making sure to plant seeds of doubt, just enough to undermine his position without him realizing it until it was too late. But even as Lara methodically laid out her revenge, a knot of doubt still twisted in her stomach. What if she couldn't pull it off? What if Ethan was too clever, too prepared for her schemes? There were moments when she questioned whether she was going too far, whether she was sacrificing too much of herself in the process. Her thirst for revenge burned hot, but there was a part of her that longed for peace, for closure. The thought of seeing him broken, shamed and without the power he had so arrogantly wielded, was the only thing that kept her going. She couldn't stop now. Too much had been taken, and too much was at stake. As the days passed, Lara's plan took shape. It was delicate, with each move calculated to create the most damage. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes. But she had already committed to the path she had chosen. Every detail, every risk, was worth it. There would be no going back. The scales would be balanced, one way or another, and Ethan would pay for what he had done. Lara's heart raced as she watched her revenge unfold with surgical precision. Each step of the plan had been carefully calculated, and she was now executing it with an almost eerie calm. The money had been moved, the assets redistributed, and Ethan's business dealings were beginning to unravel. But as the days passed, things didn't go as smoothly as she had hoped. Unexpected twists emerged that tested her nerves and resolve. The first surprise came when one of her sources, a trusted insider within Ethan's company, suddenly backed out. Lara had counted on him to help plant false rumors about Ethan's financial mismanagement, something that would trigger a scandal and force his investors to pull out. But he was scared, afraid of the consequences if things went wrong. That left Lara in a precarious position. She had to act quickly, or risk the entire plan falling apart. Frustration simmered beneath her composed exterior, but Lara wasn't about to back down. With a sharp mind and steady nerves, she adapted. She began leaking anonymous emails, disguised as whistleblowers, exposing unethical practices from Ethan's company. The leaks spread like wildfire, sparking whispers in the media and among his colleagues. It was working. Investors were beginning to ask questions, and Ethan's previously untouchable empire was beginning to show cracks. Yet, even as she gained ground, Lara faced an emotional conflict. Every time she saw a report on the news or heard someone mention Ethan's name with disdain, she couldn't shake the sense of satisfaction. But there was also a twinge of guilt. Had she gone too far? Was she becoming the very thing she hated? She wasn't just taking his money anymore. She was dismantling everything he had built, his pride and his public image. The power she felt in her calculated moves was intoxicating, but there was a part of her that questioned whether the cost of vengeance was too high. Then the ultimate test came. Lara's contact in the legal department, the one who had helped her manipulate the documents to turn the tide in her favor, was caught. A private investigator, one Ethan had hired in desperation, had linked the forgery to Lara. The walls were closing in, and for the first time she felt the weight of what she was doing. Her carefully laid plans could be exposed, and her own reputation could be ruined in the process. But Lara was prepared. She had anticipated this. She had made sure there were no traces that could directly link her back to the documents. And so, she watched with a mix of satisfaction and dread as the trap she had set for Ethan began to snap shut around him. His business associates turned on him. His reputation was in tatters. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place, and Ethan was finally being exposed for the fraud he truly was. As the final blow landed, Ethan's financial empire crumbling, his assets seized, Lara felt a rush of triumph. But beneath it, there was no joy, only the bitter taste of victory. The cost had been high. The emotional toll, even higher. She had won, but at what price? The moment of truth arrived when Lara walked into Ethan's penthouse office, the place that had once been their shared sanctuary. The polished marble floors, the sleek glass windows with a view of the city skyline. All of it now felt hollow, like a facade that had crumbled under the weight of her revenge. Ethan stood at the large desk, his face drawn, the weight of the past few weeks evident in his slumped shoulders. His empire had fallen apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the ruins of his former self. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Ethan's voice was low, tinged with a mix of rage and disbelief. His eyes, once filled with arrogance and power, now held nothing but desperation. Lara stood at the entrance, her posture rigid, her heart pounding in her chest. She had anticipated this moment for weeks, yet now that it had arrived, she wasn't sure if she was ready to face him. But she had to. She had come too far to turn back. "I knew you'd find out eventually," she replied, her voice calm, though every word was heavy with the weight of the choices she had made. "But you never thought I'd fight back, did you? You thought I was just a pawn, something you could manipulate without consequence. Well, look where we are now. Ethan's hand slammed down on the desk, his frustration breaking through. You ruined everything. You took everything I built. For what? For revenge? For some sick sense of justice? Lara's lips tightened. No, Ethan. I did this for me. For the years you stole from me. For the trust you broke, the promises you shattered. I didn't just lose money. I lost myself. I thought you were my partner, my equal. But you were always playing a game, one I didn't know I was part of. The silence between them was suffocating, the tension hanging in the air like a storm ready to break. Ethan took a step toward her, his face a mix of anger and hurt. You think I don't feel betrayed too? You think I didn't love you? Lara's eyes narrowed, the emotions bubbling up to the surface. Love? She whispered bitterly. You never loved me. You loved what I could give you: money, power, control. You used me, Ethan. And now you want to paint yourself as the victim. He shook his head, his voice rising. You've taken everything from me, Lara. Everything I ever worked for. What do you want? Do you want to destroy me completely? Is that your plan? She felt a surge of power, but with it came a gnawing doubt. This was the moment, the crossroads between complete destruction and the possibility of walking away. She had everything she had wanted: his money, his business, his reputation shattered. But was it enough? Was this all worth it? For a split second, she saw the man she had once loved, vulnerable and broken, standing before her. But the anger, the years of betrayal, the hurt, all of it flooded back in an instant. Lara's hand trembled, her heart racing as she faced the moral dilemma that had been haunting her since the first steps of her plan. She had won. But now, standing face to face with the wreckage of their past, the question lingered. Was it enough to bring him to his knees, or did she need to see him fall completely? I could destroy you right now, Ethan, Lara said softly, her voice steady but fierce. But I don't need to anymore. You've already destroyed yourself. The finality of her words hung in the air as she turned to leave, her heart heavy with the knowledge that, despite everything, it was never about destroying him. It was about reclaiming herself. And in that moment she knew she had already won. Lara sat on the balcony of her new apartment, the city stretching out before her as the sun dipped below the horizon. It had been weeks since the confrontation with Ethan, and the world had continued to spin, indifferent to the seismic shift that had occurred in her life. She had won. There was no denying that. The financial empire that Ethan had once built, the social connections he had so carefully cultivated, had all crumbled. His downfall was complete, and Lara's strategic brilliance had ensured that she had come out on top. Yet, as the evening air cooled around her, she couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered beneath the surface of her triumph. The revenge had been sweet at first. The power, the control. It had all felt like justice. Ethan had betrayed her in ways that no amount of apology could undo, and seeing him fall from grace had given her a fleeting sense of satisfaction. But as the days wore on, the satisfaction began to fade, replaced by a deeper sense of reflection. What had she really gained? Was this victory worth the price she had paid? In the quiet moments when she was alone with her thoughts, Lara realized that the woman she had been before the betrayal, the woman who had loved, trusted, and believed in the possibility of partnership, was gone. She had been replaced by someone harder, more cynical. The journey to revenge had forged her into a person capable of navigating betrayal and manipulation with cold precision. But it had also stripped away parts of her soul, the parts that had once believed in the goodness of others. Lara had learned a valuable lesson in her pursuit of revenge: the power of reclaiming control over her life, her narrative, and her future. No one could ever make her feel powerless again. The world had tried to break her, but instead, it had forced her to confront her own strength. The woman who had once felt small and invisible in the face of Ethan's dominance was no more. She had reclaimed her power, not through destruction, but through the quiet force of her own resilience. Yet the journey had come with a cost. Ethan's downfall, though satisfying in some ways, had not healed all the wounds she had suffered. The emotional scars, the betrayal, the broken trust, still lingered, and Lara knew that true healing would not come from revenge alone. It would come from learning to let go, from moving forward without the burden of anger weighing her down. She glanced at her phone, the screen lighting up with a message from an old friend, someone who had always been there, even during the darkest times. Lara had cut herself off from everyone during her pursuit of vengeance, believing that no one could understand her pain. But now, she felt the pull of reconnection, the possibility of starting anew, not with bitterness, but with hope. In that moment, Lara understood that revenge had not been the end of her story. It had been a chapter. A necessary one, perhaps, but not the final one. She had learned that justice wasn't about retribution. It was about finding peace within herself. She had gained a sense of empowerment, but it was a quiet one, built on the foundation of self-respect and the courage to move forward, despite everything. As she stood up and walked back into her apartment, Lara made a decision. She would leave the past behind. Ethan's fall from grace would remain in the past where it belonged. She would build a new life for herself, one not defined by the scars of betrayal, but by the strength and resilience that had carried her through. And with that, Lara took her first step into the future, knowing that her journey had transformed her into a woman who had learned that true power wasn't about revenge. It was about walking away with dignity and building something better, one day at a time.